The one person a narcissist cannot control forever is not the strongest person in the room, not the loudest, not the coldest, and not the one who never cared. It is often the person everyone assumes will stay the longest, the gentle one, the forgiving one, the person who keeps trying to understand instead of condemn, the person who sees pain beneath bad behavior and believes love can heal what wounds created. This is the irony almost nobody notices. The very qualities that make someone vulnerable in the beginning can become the exact qualities that make them impossible to control in the end. Because there is a kind of person who does not break the same way others break. They bend, they absorb, they endure, they overgive, they explain, they hope, they wait longer than they should, but when they finally wake up, they do not wake up halfway. They wake up completely. And once that happens, the dynamic changes in a way a narcissist rarely understands until it is too late. To understand why this person becomes unreachable, you first have to understand how narcissistic control actually works. Most people imagine control as shouting, threats, obvious cruelty, or domination. Sometimes it includes those things, but the deeper form is quieter. It is emotional conditioning. It is the creation of confusion strong enough that another person stops trusting their own reality. It is reward followed by withdrawal, warmth followed by distance, intimacy followed by criticism, attention followed by silence, promise followed by disappointment. Then, just when the other person begins to detach, affection returns. This pattern is powerful because it turns love into uncertainty, and uncertainty into obsession. The mind begins chasing consistency. The nervous system begins craving relief from the very source of pain. What started as attraction becomes dependence disguised as devotion. At the center of this pattern is hope. Hope is the lever. The narcissist does not need constant control if hope remains alive. As long as someone believes the caring version will come back, the loyal version will return, the apology will finally arrive, the breakthrough conversation will happen, the old magic will be restored, then the bond survives. Hope keeps people interpreting disrespect as stress, neglect as confusion, manipulation as insecurity. Hope can make intelligent people tolerate what logic alone would reject. It can make compassionate people abandon themselves in the name of patience. It can make years disappear. This is why some of the most thoughtful, loving, self-aware people get trapped longest. They do not stay because they are foolish. They stay because they have depth. They can imagine complexity. They can see wounds in others. They understand that people are layered and damaged and contradictory. They know humans can act badly while suffering deeply. These insights are valuable in healthy relationships. In destructive ones, they can be weaponized against the person who holds them. Compassion without boundaries becomes access. Understanding without standards becomes permission. Patience without reciprocity becomes self-erasure. But there is one person a narcissist cannot control forever. The person who eventually turns that same depth inward. The person who stops using all their perception to explain the other and starts using it to understand themselves. This shift sounds small. It is not small. It is seismic. Because the controlling dynamic depends on one central arrangement. All attention moves outward. What are they feeling? Why did they do that? What can I say to help? How do I fix this? Did I trigger them? Are they hurting? Are they scared? What do they need now? As long as the mind circles those questions, the self remains unattended, and an unattended self is easy to override. The first stage of waking up is confusion. Something feels wrong, but there is no language yet. The person still loves deeply. They still believe effort will solve it. They still replay conversations trying to understand where things went sideways. They notice that apologies rarely lead to change, that tenderness arrives unpredictably, that criticism appears when joy returns, that peace feels temporary and fragile. Yet because they are sincere, they assume sincerity on the other side. They think, if I am trying this hard, maybe they are too. This stage can last months or years, because confusion is sticky. It keeps someone searching for answers inside the maze, rather than questioning the maze itself. Then comes self-blame. This is where many controlling relationships become strongest. The caring person decides the issue must be their communication style. Their sensitivity, their past trauma, their expectations, their tone, their timing, their reactions. They read books, start therapy, apologize more skillfully, become more patient, speak more softly, lower needs, monitor emotions, and try to become easier to love. This stage looks mature from the outside because it involves introspection. But introspection under manipulation can become self-abandonment with elegant language. Growth is beautiful. But growth aimed entirely at tolerating mistreatment is captivity wearing self-improvement clothes. Then something begins to crack. Sometimes it is one incident. Sometimes it is 1,000 small moments finally forming a visible pattern. Sometimes it is the exhaustion of realizing every resolution resets into the same cycle. Sometimes it is hearing their own voice explain the situation to a friend, and suddenly noticing how abnormal it sounds. Sometimes it is looking at old messages and seeing repetition where they once saw complexity. Whatever triggers it, perception changes. The person stops evaluating isolated moments and starts seeing structure. This is dangerous for the narcissistic dynamic, because control depends on fragmentation. If each hurtful event is treated as separate, each one can be excused. A bad day, stress, miscommunication, trauma, pressure, misunderstanding. But once patterns are seen, excuses weaken. Patterns reveal intention where moments suggested accident. Patterns expose incentives. Patterns answer questions no argument can hide. Yet seeing the pattern does not always free someone immediately. Knowledge in the mind and conditioning in the body are different battles. A person can understand exactly what is happening and still feel pulled back by longing, anxiety, nostalgia, chemistry, fear of loneliness, and the memory of who they believed existed. This is why people often judge themselves unfairly. They think, if I know better, why do I still miss them? Because knowing and unwiring are not the same process. Insight is cognitive. Attachment is biological, emotional, habitual, symbolic. It takes time for the body to learn what the mind discovered. Then comes the moment that changes everything. It is often quiet, not dramatic, not cinematic, no screaming match, no grand betrayal required. Sometimes during a phone call, sometimes in silence after another predictable disappointment, the person looks at the one they loved and feels something unfamiliar, emptiness. Not sadness, not rage, not heartbreak, emptiness. The performance is visible, the script is audible, the eyes are there, the words are there, the gestures may even be there, but the substance is gone. Or perhaps it was never there in the way they imagined. They feel the absence of what they kept waiting for. This is the beginning of the end, because once authenticity is seen as performance, it cannot be unseen. Once manipulation is felt beneath tenderness, the spell weakens permanently. Once someone realizes they have been loving potential, memory, projection, and intermittent glimpses rather than stable reality, longing changes flavor. It becomes grief instead of pursuit. Grief is essential here. Many think anger is what frees people. Sometimes anger helps create distance, but grief creates completion. Anger still faces outward. Grief eventually turns inward and moves through. The person mourns not only the relationship but the fantasy of what it could have been, the years invested, the version of themselves who kept waiting, the innocence that believed effort guarantees reciprocity, the imagined future that will never arrive. This grief can feel devastating because it includes mourning something that was partly constructed in hope. But once fully grieved, it no longer controls behavior. Now the narcissist often senses the shift before words are spoken. They may not understand it consciously, but they feel access changing. Responses shorten, emotional reactions diminish, arguments no longer ignite. Pleading stops. The person who once chased resolution becomes calm. Attention withdraws. This is when many escalations happen. Sudden affection returns, promises intensify, vulnerability appears, grand gestures emerge, memories are invoked, emergencies arise, jealousy is provoked, smear campaigns begin. The aim is always the same: restore emotional engagement. But the awakened person responds differently, not because they hate, not because they became cruel, because the internal economy changed. They are no longer spending themselves externally while starving internally. They have begun to feel their own pain with the same seriousness they once reserved for everyone else. They recognize how often they minimized wounds to preserve hope. They notice how they called loneliness loyalty, anxiety passion, confusion complexity, depletion love. Once named honestly, these states lose glamour. This is why the one person a narcissist cannot control forever is often the deeply feeling person. Because deep feeling, once redirected inward, becomes discernment. The same sensitivity that once detected others' moods, now detects personal depletion. The same empathy once used to excuse others now understands self-betrayal. The same patience once spent waiting now supports healing. The same loyalty once given outward becomes commitment to boundaries. Many expect liberation to look dramatic. Often it looks quiet. It looks like no longer needing to explain. It looks like no longer checking the phone. It looks like sleeping peacefully after silence. It looks like hearing mutual gossip and feeling uninterested. It looks like declining one more conversation designed to confuse. It looks like not needing them to admit anything. This last part matters deeply. The need for confession keeps many people tethered. They wait for accountability to validate reality. But waiting for someone committed to distortion to deliver clarity is a losing strategy. Freedom accelerates when validation becomes internal. The person who is free does not need the narcissist to say, "Yes, I manipulated you. Yes, I lied. Yes, I exploited your care. Yes, you were right." They know what they lived. They trust their memory enough. They trust their body enough. They trust the pattern enough. This trust restores dignity. Once dignity returns, crumbs lose appeal. There's another misunderstanding worth correcting. Detachment is not numbness. It is processed feeling. Numbness suppresses. Detachment completes. Numbness can be reversed by the next trigger. Detachment remains because it was earned through honest pain. The free person may still feel sadness, compassion, even moments of nostalgia. But none of those feelings dictate movement anymore. Emotion becomes weather, not command. The narcissist often has moves against love, anger, jealousy, guilt, fear, loneliness, desire, and competition. These emotions can be played against themselves. But there are few moves against grounded indifference. Not performative indifference meant to provoke a reaction. Genuine indifference born from clarity. When someone no longer needs to be chosen, understood, apologized to, envied, chased, or validated, the usual levers fail. This does not mean healing is instant. There may be relapses in thought, dreams, sudden sadness, trauma responses, missing the familiar, questioning oneself. But these are waves, not directions. The course has changed even if the sea is rough. With time, nervous system peace becomes more attractive than intermittent intensity. Stability becomes sexy. Calm becomes desirable. Respect becomes non-negotiable. Eventually the person sees something almost painful in hindsight, how little they required to stay. A text after days of silence, a small kindness after cruelty, a brief tender moment after repeated disrespect. They realize they accepted percentages while calling it love. This recognition can sting, but it also educates. Standards become clearer not through theory but experience. And something else changes. Future access points close. The wound that made the old dynamic feel normal begins to heal. Maybe it was fear of abandonment, maybe earning love through caretaking, maybe believing chaos means passion, maybe equating self-sacrifice with worth, maybe mistaking being needed for being loved. When these roots are addressed, the old pattern loses magnetic force. It is not just that they escaped one person. That is the deepest victory. Many leave one controller only to meet another in a different costume. They change names but not dynamics. The truly free person does deeper work. They become different in the places that once made repetition likely. They learn to trust slowness over intensity, consistency over chemistry, accountability over charm, peace over drama, mutuality over potential. They stop auditioning for love and start participating in it. If you are still inside such a cycle, there is no shame in where you are. People leave psychologically before they leave physically. Emotionally before they leave socially, internally before they leave publicly. The timeline is personal. Forcing yourself before your nervous system is ready can create return trips that feel like failure. They are not failure. They are information. Compassion matters here, especially self-compassion. If you're in the stage of confusion, gather patterns. If you're in the stage of self-blame, widen the lens. If you're in the stage of knowledge, be patient with your body. If you're in grief, let it move. If you are in calm detachment, protect it. Every stage has dignity when met honestly. And if you are already free, understand what actually happened. You did not simply leave a difficult person. You ended a system organized around your self-neglect. You withdrew from a contract you never consciously signed. You reclaimed attention, intuition, time, energy, and the right to define reality for yourself. That is no small event. It changes everything built afterward. So who is the one person a narcissist cannot control forever? It is the person who eventually values truth more than fantasy. The person who stops confusing potential with presence. The person who turns empathy inward without losing kindness outward. The person who is willing to grieve what never was instead of chasing what will never be. The person who learns that love without respect is hunger, that chemistry without safety is chaos, that promises without patterns are noise. It is the person who remembers that being chosen by someone unstable is not victory, and being rejected by manipulation is not loss. It is the person who discovers that peace feels unfamiliar only at first. It is the person who understands that loneliness passes faster than self-betrayal heals. It is the person who stops asking how to save the connection and starts asking what the connection is costing their soul. Once someone reaches that place, control has an expiration date. Access narrows, hooks rust, scripts fail, performances look theatrical instead of romantic, fear tactics feel transparent. Guilt stops landing where self-respect has grown roots. The old game can still be attempted, but it cannot be sustained. And perhaps the most poetic part of all is this: the qualities once exploited become the foundation of freedom. Sensitivity becomes intuition, loyalty becomes standards, patience becomes discipline, compassion becomes self-protection, depth becomes wisdom. What was once used against them becomes what saves them. That is why the one person a narcissist cannot control forever is often the very person they underestimated most. Not because that person became hard. Not because they stopped loving, but because they finally included themselves in the love they were always giving away.